man.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Thursday Super Show. Here we are. Good morning, John. How are you today?
I'm good. How you doing today, Alex?
I'm not doing too bad. We've got we have lately been struggling at times with topics because obviously with the entertainment business kind of being in flux right now, it's been weird. But today we've actually got kind of a long list.
We've got an abundance of news. Absolutely.
You're gonna have to give me more. Which car, Necron? I don't know. My car. I've run that thing into the ground. I'm gonna keep driving it until it dies. That's my goal. I've had that car since 2012. Whew. So it's a Hyundai. I'm running it until it dies, until I can go buy the car that I really, really want. I really want a Ford Lightning. That's my goal.
Yes. Oh wow, we're both on the same goal.
Yes, I really want that Ford Lightning. That is my next car.
And the F-150 Lightning is it is surprisingly cheap for an electric truck. The base model comes at $51K, and you don't need the trappings. You don't need all the other stuff in the truck.
And it looks like a truck. Have you seen the Cyber?
Sometimes there's jitters. Welcome back, everybody.
Jeez, stupid Twitch.
Hey, at least it did it early this time.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm happy about that, and I just adjusted my focus while we were screwy. But before Twitch decides to go wonky on us one more time, we should probably jump into topics. Don't forget, if you miss any of the super shows, or you want to go back and review what we talked about so you can come to the store and yell at us about it, you can do that at youtube.com/Heaven PNW. That is where you can find all of the back episodes as well as clips and super show highlights. So yeah, go check us out there. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget you can use your Prime sub on us. Yay, Prime subs. Oh, thank you for the gifted subs. Look at that, Necron. I really appreciate that. That's 5 gifted subs for the community. John, pick a number, 2, 3, 4, or 5.
3.
3. There you go, Ishatal. Thank you for the gifted subs, guys. We really appreciate it. That is a great way to support the show. And again, if you have Amazon Prime, you can sub for free and give us some of Amazon's money. I like getting Amazon's money.
Bezos bucks.
Bezos bucks. Let's go. Thanks, 3 it is. All right, everybody. Again, thank you for the gifted subs. All right. So, our first topic today is some major leaks for the new Nintendo console.
Yes.
Right. Now, we knew from Investor Day calls and some of the stockholder stuff that we were getting a new console for Nintendo next year.
Yep.
And it's about time.
It is.
The Switch
really
is getting a little long in the tooth. But some details about it have leaked out. You want to pick it up from here, John?
Well, the biggest things that we kind of know right now, or at least that we're hearing rumors about, are the potential dev kits being in hands. And I think that's something that we heard about a little while ago, but as we move closer and closer to the date, I think we can kind of confirm that from the outside with the investor call, with the date that they're targeting, with knowing that, any major game is going to take a little while to run up. I know we have some devs in chat right now. I feel like that is a very true rumor, but it also is kind of a big jump, knowing that hardware might be on the horizon. They're pushing another bundle at the end of the year, I think, to get, they're doing the Mario Kart and the Animal Crossing bundle at the end of the year. I think this is the final push for the Switch. I think that we are going to move into a new era of hardware. And I think that what we have seen, especially with the investor calls, the leaks, the various other things, I think that's pretty true. I think we're getting close.
So the leaked rumors is that this one is going to be as powerful as the PS5.
Yes, it could. The specific wording that I read was that it is powerful enough to play the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is an interesting thing to say, at 60 frames a second. And so those two things are very interesting to hear, thinking about the hardware in general.
I would like to see them, but will it be as ugly as the PS5?
I hope so. I hope it is heinous. I hope we can put that next to all the other heinous objects that are on the shelf. Say, Lynn, welcome on in. How you doing today? Thanks for being here. But like, yeah, maybe not. Fingers crossed.
So not a handheld thing. That's not really clear based on the leaks that I've seen.
Yeah, so I would assume we're going to continue to go with the handheld generation. I think that tablets and stuff have gotten strong enough, especially with the new releases and chips. Hopefully we're going to see something that can be portable, but also as strong as, say, newer phones.
Or like a Steam Deck.
Yeah, like a Steam Deck. Even because knowing what they can pack into the hardware now or pack into the little container now is pretty good.
So chat's asking, how do you fit a PS5 into a handheld? And that actually brings me to another interesting thing about the leaks that I saw in the article I was reading this morning. One, it's going to have a new cartridge type. Right?
Yep.
And the fact that they said cartridge sparked something in me. And you and I were talking about this a little bit in the pre-show.
Yeah.
So one of the things that they used to do in the Super Nintendo era, as the Super Nintendo started getting kind of longer in the tooth and started like running into hardware limitations, is the nice thing about cartridges as opposed to CDs is they could add computing power. They could add oomph to the game by putting chips and other stuff like GPU increases and stuff like that into
the hardware cartridge.
The cartridge itself.
Yeah.
So when you plugged it in, it was getting its power and it did everything it needed to do. And I wonder if the idea of going back to a cartridge, right, is built around this idea of longevity for the hardware and really being able to get more out of the hardware itself, because you're not putting the entire load of running the game on the actual console.
Did they call the current Switch generation of chips? Did they call them? Why is my brain blanking on this?
Cartridges?
Right now? Cartridges. Yeah.
I'm gonna look that up for Nintendo Switch cartridges. Cards. What is the official name? A game card.
A game card. Interesting. Okay, so the fact that they're calling this a cartridge and not another game card.
Again,
my brain goes to backwards compatibility. That's the one thing that I'm wondering about this. If they're still sticking with the cartridge format and we're going to have a slot, are we going to see their normal handheld progression where you could play the games on the newer hardware, like the older stuff, like we talked about, the Game Boy Advanced on the newer Game Boys.
And I stick to what I said when we were talking about this in the pre-show. If it is not backwards compatible, again, the amount of real estate in the system that you need to do to have that little chip slot for the game card is minimal, right? Like
it's the emulation on the hardware that we were talking about that might be the tricky
and again,
part.
it may be the same software running under the hood on a new hardware platform, and they're fine. People are saying they've already done dual slot in the DS generations. Yeah, and pretty easy to support the Switch form factor, which again, I think if it's not backwards compatible, I think it really hamstrings this console.
And they have said, which, this is, take this insight however you want, they have said that they are going to bring over the old Nintendo accounts that you made on the Switch to the new hardware. So unless that changes, that tells me that they might have that. They might be expecting people to want that backwards compatibility. Because as we talked about too, if this new console has backwards compatibility and you have your old console laying around, you're an early adopter, you go buy the new console, that's just another Switch console that you hand off to somebody else, and now you've got 4 controllers and 2 switches in the house, and like yada yada yada.
You're firmly in that Nintendo ecosystem.
You're firmly in the Nintendo ecosystem, and you don't have to go somewhere for your more powerful console anymore. You've got your handheld portable, and then hopefully still handheld more powerful console that if you wanted to, you could take with you.
Well, then I think about the competitive scene and stuff like that. It also means that you can get your competitive scene and all these other people onto the new console quickly, right? Because like if Smash Brothers Ultimate is not backwards compatible in the new system, that competitive scene is going to stay with the Switch.
Yeah.
Until they come out with a new Smash Brothers.
Well, we've seen it as we've seen what happened with Melee.
Yeah.
Melee plays Melee to this day.
Yep, and they are on the GameCube. Whereas if you want them to convert over to that new console, and it is just a super powerful handheld, you need to have something for that chip.
Well, and hardware. So like hardware is going to be the next big question, right? Like, will my controllers, for example, be compatible with this next generation of hardware? Will will we have backwards compatibility from the chip slot? Will there be these subtle little things that like a lot of people aren't thinking about right now? Because I think if you own a Switch and you've had it for a while, you've probably bought a couple peripherals. You may have even bought a handful of other controllers.
Yeah, I have a Switch Pro controller at home.
Yeah, so like, will that stuff be compatible with next-gen hardware? Because that would also just be another huge win for them as compared to most everybody else.
Yeah. Chat's saying, be interested to see what bus they use for the cartridges to allow for expansion via cartridges, which we were talking about a few minutes ago. We might see an eSATA connection or something. Could be. What other series has a game that people clung to with this dedication?
Because Saitlin, you make a good point. So Saitlin is pretty well versed in the fighting scene area, or fighting game, scene. And I think that's a good point because Melee is a bit of an odd duck where like when I say Melee players just play Melee, that is the game, that is the hill they live and die on. And so it is a bit of an odd duck because a lot of people will generationally move, like Street Fighter players, Mortal Kombat players. You don't see them playing a lot of, unless there was a bad iteration, you don't see them going back often. Melee is Melee. So what other series has a game that people clung to with this dedication?
Let me think about that for a second. That's actually a tough question.
I feel like there's a low-hanging fruit here that I'm missing.
I think so too. Again, I think about our Ultimate players. Like those are the ones that I'm thinking of. And if Nintendo doesn't want to put pressure on themselves to have a crazy launch release like set of games, right? Because that's hurt them in the past, right? They need a killer app at launch.
Yep.
Right?
And it won't be a new Smash because Sakurai has already said we don't know what's happening with Smash right now. He put out a video that said he would love to see somebody take up the mantle, but he doesn't think anybody can.
Right.
Which tells me right now, because he's pretty open when he's developing it, I don't think we got a new Smash on the horizon.
No.
And so what is going to be a flagship title that people have that level of dedication to?
And I think that, especially with say take something like Tears of the Kingdom, like we were talking about in the pre-show. If you make it fully backwards compatible, right, and you make it fully backwards compatible, you don't need a slew of games because now you've got Tears of the Kingdom running properly.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
You've got it on a new system, and I think a lot of people will either pick up Tears of the Kingdom or will revisit Tears of the Kingdom on a new console when Nintendo goes, this thing is 5 times as powerful as the Switch is. Right?
No more lag.
No more lag. No more frame rates.
Whatever that looks like.
No more issues. And by the way, here's a DLC expansion. So
they said yesterday they are not doing Tears of the Kingdom DLC.
They're not.
100% are not doing it.
Okay.
So that has also gotten a lot of people to speculate that the new generation of hardware may be coming out soon because if they're not working on DLC and the director said they're not doing it 100%. That means there's something that they are working on. So if they're not working on the DLC for Legend of Zelda right now, what are they working on?
They've got to be working on a new Zelda title.
Something.
When's the last time we got a good Metroid title?
I mean, okay, so Dread. Dread was genuinely a good title.
Okay. When did that come out?
Last year before. It was recent. Will we see Prime finally? The actual new Prime we've been promised for like a generation at this point.
On a new console, you might.
As a launch title?
Yeah.
You know, what's going to move units off the shelves that's not Mario Kart, a new Mario, which we're getting at the end of the year. We're getting Wonder already.
Yep.
Again, another reason why I think backwards compatibility is going to be a huge thing, because like,
If it's not, they're going to have a hard time.
they're launching Christmas bundles that are Mario Kart themed and Animal Crossing themed, and what a better way to usher in new hardware than to have all of these games already for you.
Wind Waker HD that isn't trapped on Wii U that would be good
Oh,
too.
see, there, you know, that, so like maybe Zelda is the dedicated Ravenous fan base thing.
That might be it.
Like, and that's why we're not seeing anything. But it's so weird that they would do something back to back like that. Although we do have at least a year before we even see this hardware, I'm sure. Because if they do what they did with the Switch, it's going to be like, yo, here's our new hardware, pre-order it now, it's out in 3 months.
Yeah.
So that's how the Switch happened.
Tears of the Kingdom did just come out this year.
Yeah.
I'm going to adjust Mario Maker 3 first. Mario Maker 3 doesn't have a huge fan. They have a very dedicated community.
Yeah.
And they have a very dedicated fan base. But it is not it's not ginormous. That's kind of why I think Tears of the Kingdom, and again, this is why I think that the success out the gate of this console entirely rests on backwards compatibility. Because when people played Tears of the Kingdom, the biggest thing that I heard was complaining was the Switch just wasn't powerful enough to run it. It was a beautiful game. It was great, but the Switch just chugged.
Yeah.
Right? It was the limit of what the Switch was capable of. This is an older console, and
They've maximized its potential, absolutely.
and it was done. And so that's this. So I think that it saves them some headache in having to have a bunch of like killer launch titles right at the launch of the new console, right? Because they've got a lot of really good titles for the Switch, and if it's backwards compatible and it runs better, I think people are going to be happy.
You just need one. You need one or two big things, big flagship things that people can sink their teeth into to show off the power of this new hardware, if that's the direction you're going. And then, yeah, if you've got that backwards compatibility, you can rest on your laurels for a little bit while some games are developed, and you've got this whole catalog for people to explore.
Well, and then the other thing that you said a little while ago, and now it keeps popping back into my head, is you kept saying that in the leaks they're saying this thing could run the Final Fantasy VII remake, right? Now, famously, Square, before it was Square Enix, it was Squaresoft. Squaresoft had a super tight relationship with Nintendo, all the way through the first 6 Final Fantasies, right? Yep. And then when Nintendo, and if you haven't read the articles on this, there's a bunch of stuff out there on the internet. It was the Sony and Nintendo breakup, right? Because the PlayStation was supposed to be a Nintendo peripheral until Nintendo backed out of the deal, right? And that was when Nintendo decided to stay with cartridges for the 64 and PlayStation, Sony was like, nope, we're doing the CDs. That was when they broke up with Nintendo and haven't really been back.
Yeah.
Right? And I am certain that there is factions within Nintendo that would love to get Final Fantasy back on Nintendo.
Oh, I'm sure there's tons of people that would love it also from a community side.
A Chrono Trigger remake, like a true... Like what they did with Final Fantasy VII,
yeah.
Right? Could we get a Chrono Trigger, like a full-blown remake of Chrono Trigger? Like, I would buy that in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah, and like when we're talking about hardware, Saban does make a good point. People bought the Switch version, and then played it on emulator, so they could get that sweet 60 frames. And since you have the copy, feel free. Mario Odyssey 2, I don't know. You know, that does make me wonder.
There
Mario
would be
is good.
a Mario game on this new console for sure.
Yeah, and we're probably going to get, like Salem was saying, Ultimate probably will make its way over. I'd be surprised if they don't continue to milk that, especially with that Nintendo online stuff where you get all the free courses.
Yep.
Star Fox, that's an interesting one. Star Fox, Tomodachi Express brings up Star Fox. And like, so to answer your previous question, did they make a Mario Galaxy recently? No, but they did make a new Luigi's Mansion, and it was pretty well received. Star Fox, to me, I don't know if Star Fox hits the same way as a title the way that it used to for Nintendo. It doesn't carry any weight when somebody's like, oh, Star Fox, it doesn't hit nostalgia points for me.
And the thing is I think that there's a group of people who are nostalgic for Star Fox, right? And the problem is that they basically abandoned that IP
because there's so many
after
fly
the
around
64
in
era.
space. Because it would need to turn into something else
Yeah.
besides what it was. But not improbable. Do I expect that to be a thing they lead with? Probably not.
Probably not.
Crystal Chronicles.
Again, I would love to see, because in my
Yeah.
opinion, some of the best Square Enix games were on the Super Nintendo, right? Chrono Trigger is a classic, right? I mean, it is an absolute classic. I love Chrono Trigger.
Ishental, see you later night.
Yep. You know, there were some really good Final Fantasy games on the Super Nintendo. I would love to see that kind of come back together. The other thing that we haven't touched on yet, and this also came out in the rumors, a camera.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, right? If there's no reason they couldn't.
There's no reason they couldn't, but I was like, why would they do it?
Yeah, and that's my thought is like even the Switch, right? Like the online stuff was not really much of their focus out of the gate. They had a web browser that was hidden. You had to like go and dig and find it, and it was very limited. So like Nintendo's not really been big about that sort of online all the time connection in the same way that I think people are kind of used to in this day and age. So is that something that would change for them? You know, you got to wonder like, would a camera be a thing that they'd want? Would they want this to be more like you carry it everywhere, you take pictures with it, you do your internet stuff with it, you post on Instagram with it? Like, is that something that you see Nintendo going towards?
So here's my theory. This is the only theory I have on this.
Print out my pictures at Blockbusters again, yes. Or just pick up the little printer for your Game Boy.
I love that thing. It was like basically a receipt printer. Here's the only thing I can think of, right? Everybody, PlayStation, Meta, they're all going towards VR, right? What about, and one of the things that made Pokemon Go successful was the augmented reality aspect of it. The fact that it used your phone's camera and you could, get pictures of Pokemon sitting on top of something. Could they be doing an augmented reality type system?
Absolutely. I could definitely see Nintendo doing something like that.
Which I think would be more in their line than virtual reality.
Well, and let me double check this specifically, but last year or the year before, they filed a VR patent.
Yeah, while you're checking that,
yeah.
Aren't they really hard on streamers playing their games? They used to be really bad about it. Nintendo used to copyright strike basically everybody. They've gotten better.
They have a bad relationship with the fighting game community because the fighting game community was a little bullish, and I have thoughts and opinions on that. I think Nintendo did the right thing there, but they also have a weird relationship with the Mario Maker community because they struck and took down all of Grand Pooh Bear's videos at some point. So like their relationship with their creator community is really weird.
And they had this, like, they tried to stand up the Nintendo Creator Program way back in 15 or 16, I think. And that went over like a lead balloon.
Yeah.
Especially with the cut that they wanted.
So real quick, jumping back to the VR thing just for a second. November 15th, 2022, Nintendo did file a patent for a VR device setup. It didn't really say what it was going to connect to, just the fact that they filed it last year. So the thoughts of it having a camera or any sort of stuff like that isn't that too far-fetched, especially if it is going to have VR
or augmented
potential.
Reality.
Yeah, because like honestly, like VR would literally be just slapping, like you could technically do VR by slapping the Switch, splitting the screen, running the image. The Switch is obviously not powerful enough to do that, but like that's what a lot of VR is, just split an image on the screen. So I think there is some potential there, and having a camera on there wouldn't be too far-fetched if that is the angle that they're aiming for.
Yeah, Pokemon Go-ish Pokemon game. I could see Nintendo doing something like that. With as popular as Go was and still is actually for Niantic, I could for sure see them trying to do, like as an add-on or an additional activity or side quests, a Pokemon Go-ish, like AR kind of game on a new console if they've got the printer or the camera to do it. The Google Cardboard route, no, I don't think they're going to go that way. Just stick it in your face, it's fine. Yeah, that was weird when they did that. I don't know. I'm super fascinated to see what Nintendo comes out with. All these leaks kind of coming faster. I think that, it does. And I've said this on the show a bunch of times. Guys, go listen to investor calls. You want to know what's really going on with some of these game companies and the places where they will let stuff slip and things like that. Go listen to their investor calls. When they're like, oh, okay, this is our thing, to make their investors chill out, they will let some cool stuff slip.
Actually, so real quick on that, Nintendo Labo did do a VR kit. So I don't know if you're Nintendo with the
I remember the Labo.
familiar with the Labo, but like they literally did one, and it's funny as Salen is saying in this shot. Real quick, I'll just point it at the camera. The person is, in fact, just wearing
the Labo
the cardboard on their head.
Oh my God. It's going to be an interesting year for Nintendo. It's going to be a really interesting year for Nintendo. I am looking forward to seeing what this new console brings. Because they've kind of been one for one, like one good, one bad since the year 2000. Right?
As I am all for it as long as it is so if Nintendo steps into the current gen, race that we're in right now and is in league with, the PlayStations and the Xboxes, maybe, you can't do 120 frames or whatever, who cares? But if they can play current gen games as good as, 60 frames, like an Xbox Series S or X, then I think they are in the running, and it becomes a very different conversation about Nintendo, because Nintendo traditionally has put out, as we all know, fairly last-gen hardware when new-gen stuff is coming out.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, their strategy for the last 23 years, and Nintendo has said this publicly, like, we don't want to compete with Sony and Xbox. We're doing our own thing.
Yeah.
Right? Sony and Xbox can have that side of the market. We don't care, right? And it's served them, that strategy has served them well.
Which is why I think, like, even if they, like, I don't think they would try to directly compete, but, like, just people, the groundswell of them having a powerful console, a air quotes powerful console out there versus kind of what we're dealing with like the Switch right now. Switch is a fantastic piece of hardware. The OLED is a fantastic piece of hardware. But being able to put a little more juice behind that, and again, playing something like a Final Fantasy remake, that tells me that so many things could be possible at that point. So I'm excited to see what they do, where that goes, but we could talk about leaks for forever.
For days. Well, let us know what you think down in the comments. I'm super excited to see what happens. This next year is going to be really interesting. Okay, which console usually comes out first? They all tend to release at the same time. Well, at least since the PS2, which released at the same time as the Xbox, they've generally released the same year.
Yep.
The 360 came out just ahead of the PS3. I know that the PS3 was a little delayed. And then the Series X and the Xbox One and the PS4 came out at the same time. And that was the year that Microsoft famously screwed up E3, and Sony cobbled together that loaning your friend a game commercial.
Oh, I
still remember that year at E3, and Microsoft was kicking, and they got rolled in the press. They got rolled.
How do you share a game on PlayStation? Literally just hands them a copy of it.
Right after Microsoft comes out and goes, the Kinect is integral to the Xbox's thing, and
all your games are locked to your console, and all this
DRM,
other shit.
Oh yeah, no, that was always a problem. So they generally are pretty close by. Yeah, within a year.
Original Xbox was a year behind PS2. Okay.
Yeah, a year behind PS2. That's why I think we've gotten to the console generation topic since then, since the Xbox and PS2. And so I know there's a few people who are surprised that PlayStation hasn't released like a Pro yet this deep into this generation. I know that one's supposed to come out next year, supposedly. That's what Sony's Investor Day call said, was that they're going to release a PS5 Pro next year. I think we're still probably 3 years away from a new generation of consoles, and honestly,
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with it, but B, I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft gave up consoles.
I think it'll be a slow. I think it'll be a slow. Like if Game Pass goes as successfully as they seem to be banking on it to be, I think that yeah, it's an inevitable thing. Because if they're just in every other piece of hardware, they don't need to put out hardware.
They're bringing up the Xbox One was supposed to be a media station with the Kinect. Yes, and I know what it was supposed to be. And the thing is that I actually think the Xbox One was about 6 years ahead of its time, 7 years ahead of its time. I think that what they were trying to go for with the Xbox One was correct. I think Microsoft just misjudged where the market was at that time.
Yeah.
I think if you tried to sell that same concept now, that this is the one box you need for your full home entertainment system, and you can stream Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu, plus play your video games, plus.
Because we weren't quite at that apex that we are now with streaming services.
And we hadn't hit we just got over 50% of people have now cut the cable cord, right? Like we just crossed the 50% mark of nationwide.
Yeah, because didn't they even develop that you could run a traditional TV line through it or something?
Yes, you could.
It was really they were like media.
Yeah.
No games, media.
And that was the other reason they got crushed that year at E3 is that they didn't talk about video games. And PlayStation, all PlayStation did that year was talk about video games. Yeah. Chat's agreeing with you. There was a way to do it with cable. Again, I think if you took that same Xbox One concept now and tried to sell it, I think it would work. I just think at that time, everybody was like, what are you talking about?
I want some freaking games.
I want my
This is a new
console, and my console is not supposed to be my DVD player.
And most people in that time, that many years ago, had a way to play media that was not your console.
Right.
They just wanted a console to play some games.
Yep. That said, I think if they tried the same thing now, it would probably work. I just don't think it was good for then.
No.
All right.
Speaking of big media, what's up with this Ahsoka stuff?
Well, we're going to hold on Ahsoka for just a minute. Make sure he comes back in.
Has it been 40 minutes
It
yet?
has not quite been, so we're going to do this one real quick.
Cool.
More leaks. Mortal Kombat
leaks.
1, though. Now, you told me that somebody broke embargo and got a hold of a cart.
Yeah, so it looks like some things going around online right now. We have a full roster. We are not going to be sharing the roster as a visual image, but it has leaked online.
Because we're saying Warner Brothers is copyright
Warner
striking.
Brothers is hitting basically anybody that shows anything, so we can talk about it a little bit. So there was a leak. It looks like it was a Nintendo Switch cartridge that got leaked, and somebody got their hands on it. Somebody broke Street Date, or somebody took it out of the back of the shop, or whatever that looks like. But we do have a full roster list, and this must be a pretty real roster list because WB has been seriously striking anybody that's put stuff up about it.
That's generally a good indicator that when they start copyright striking, like, oh, okay, so it's real.
And all of the characters that we have seen in the game appear in this list in one form or another, and the various demos and betas and stuff that people have played kind of confirms that while some characters aren't in some versions, like in some of the betas, and some of them weren't in some of the demos, altogether, a lot of these characters were what made up the roster. And the leaked list is looking pretty solid. No weird names, nothing strange on the list.
Nope.
We looked it over earlier. Looks pretty good.
Smoke, Rain, Kenshi, Johnny Cage, Katana, Melina, Li Mei, Baraka, Tanya, Reiko, Shang Tsung for the pre-order, Liu Kang, Kung Lao, Raiden, General Shao. Sindel, Garrus, Reptile. None of it looks weird to me.
Yeah, and then you got all the cameo characters listed. So it's very exciting. It sucks. It sucks kind of when you see some of this stuff because I like to be surprised when I pop in the game and see it for the first time. But leaks happen. Leaks this early are kind of wild to me for a full roster list. But we'll see.
It's 12 days before the launch.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
2 weeks. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that somehow it got out because anywhere where cartridges or CDs have been shipped, where they're going to be done as physical copies, they're going to be in the hands of distributors and stores by
Most
now.
of them are there at this point, yeah.
And so, it doesn't surprise me. it looks really good. And so explain also to the audience, because I was confused because I hadn't finished 11, what the reset for the timeline is.
Yeah, so yeah, there was a big reset. Liu Kang, for quick spoilers for anybody that doesn't want the end of 11 spoiled, because it was the actual final part of the story for 11 was a very large DLC that added a ton of content. So real quick, 15-second spoilers, plug ears if you don't want to hear it. At the end of 11, Liu Kang, the Fire God, basically redid the entire universe. That's why he's a crazy-looking blue and red fire god, dragon spewing person right now. But he has started the whole universe over again after defeating Chronica and all of that stuff happening. And now we are basically back to Mortal Kombat 1 style of stuff, but it is technically a continuation and a new universe at the same time. So it is continuation of 11, it is a new space, and it is a return to form as far as like classic Mortal Kombat is concerned. And Salen brings up a good point. I'm more surprised they haven't already shared a complete roster for marketing hype. Actually, the funny thing is, the day that leak went out, they actually had a video for one of the characters that I'm blanking on the name of right now that Megan Fox is voicing, and they put that out like right around when the leak happened. And they have a really good Jennifer's Body reference in the
really?
In the trailer if you have not seen it yet.
All right, I'll have to go take a look at that one. That actually brings up the thing. Why is Warner Brothers copyright striking anybody who shares the... I mean, at this point, it's out.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
I've never understood... video game companies are bad about it. Movie studios are a little better. If it leaks, just dump it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, if the trailer for X movie leaks, I don't know why they don't just immediately dump it on YouTube. Especially if it's like a crappy, like, cell phone held up.
I think some of it comes down to these things are timed so far out in advance that they've got these dates set for marketing to push these specific things out. And like, I think that if they had something ready, they might do it. But I think the thing they wanted to push out that day was the Megan Fox thing, to hopefully kind of take some steam away from it. But yeah, normally I would say the same thing. If I've seen that happen before. Somebody leaked it, all right, the studio just drops the whole thing.
Dump
Here
it.
it is.
Yep, go.
Okay, watch it in good quality from us.
Yep. Because people are going to go to that good quality thing more than the crappy leaked version.
Yeah, Celine, exactly. It's usually related to properties that have explicit marketing plans. Like, I'm sure this Megan Fox thing cost a shitload of money on both sides, and they wanted to make sure that it happened the day and date that they had it planned. So I wouldn't be surprised within the next couple of days if we don't get a full, here is the release trailer or whatever, or something to kind of like follow up and take away from the leaks. Saying, would recommend picking up the 11 Plus Aftermath bundle on deep sale and just passing the controller with friends for an evening or two's entertainment. Yeah, so if you are interested in the storyline, you can find those usually on a really good sale. I'm sure it's on a really good sale right now. And
I think it's on Game Pass too.
I think so. And honestly, the story in Mortal Kombat 11 is really good. Like, I genuinely am enjoying the Mortal Kombat storylines, and I don't play a whole bunch of competitive Mortal Kombat. I pick them up every time they come out to play the single player mode. And this one looks incredible. It looks like a full freaking movie, because 11 was basically a movie, basically a show, many hours. I think it was like 9, 10, 11 hours or something. It was like a nice long chunk of game.
There you go. Let's know what you think. Look over the roster. I'm curious why WB doesn't just drop it now. Like, and here's the thing, you guys got to start expecting leaks. I love you companies, but the fact that you think that these leaks aren't going to happen just boggles my mind.
I'm honestly surprised that somebody didn't data mine all the characters from when we had the demos. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe they were just a lot more careful with it, but
maybe.
Who knows?
All right, so now that some other people have jumped back into the chat, we're going to talk a little bit about Ahsoka. Ahsoka is now halfway through its season. And there was some interesting stuff in the episode that happened this week, namely how the episode ends. And the episode ends, spoilers, with Ahsoka in the world between worlds, and she's looking at a manifestation, supposedly, of Anakin. But what drew me today to talk about this is this. Episode 5 is going to movie theaters.
Yeah, so they are episode 4 released normally as it would
Disney
on
Plus.
streaming. and it sounds like they are planning a theatrical release for episode 5, which tells me personally that either there's going to be big name talent showing up in it, or something they really want hype to get out about happening in the episode that we've kind of talked about briefly before the show.
Definitely, maybe Anakin. So they've revealed him. I mean, maybe it's Thrawn's reveal. Maybe it's a fight between Anakin and Ahsoka in the War Between Worlds. I have no idea. Now, that it is entirely possible that Disney's just doing random crap and just being like, fuck it.
Put it in theaters. We'll see what happens.
It is a very limited release. It's LA, New York, Dallas, Chicago, and Boston are the only 5 cities where they are doing this.
So yeah, unless you're in a major metropolitan area, even like Seattle isn't getting it, but
Yeah.
like a fairly large one, it's a handful of places. Maybe if they see success in this, we'll see it pop up in a few more places. But it is curious at all that they are taking a show that is for streaming and bringing it to any theaters whatsoever.
Yes.
And so the only thing that I don't think we covered is like, are they doing that day and date that the thing is going to release while it's streaming?
Yeah.
Or
It's day and date.
So like, if you're in one of those places, you could go watch it at the same time. Everybody at home is going to get to watch it, but nobody at home is going to miss out for like a day or something.
But
like
on the big screen.
Okay, cool. So, but nobody at home is going to be like having to wait.
No.
Anything like that. Okay, cool.
And they've been doing, with Ahsoka, they've done a different release schedule. They used to release it on the day of the episode. It was released at midnight Eastern time, 12:01 a.m. So it was hitting at 12:01 a.m. East Coast, 9:01 p.m. West Coast time, right, for date. Now what they're doing is they've actually backed that down 3 hours.
Okay.
So that it releases in prime time on the East Coast and early evening on the West Coast on Disney+. I wonder if it's going to be a big lore episode with, like I said, lots of star power. The thing is that I don't know what stars they would be bringing in.
So I guess we've already seen like, what was it like? I say star power here, but like Jack Black was in The Mandalorian or something. Like they kind of not. Was it The Mandalorian or
no?
Was
it was Mandalorian.
It was Mandalorian.
Yep, that was this most recent season.
So I know there's like stars that they've brought in, but
they didn't. They didn't put that on the big screen.
They're not. Also, those star moments aren't traditionally big hype moments for Star Wars. They're just like usually like a cameo.
It's a fun cameo.
For a video,
hey, this celebrity is a big fan of Star Wars.
Yeah.
Let's toss him in an episode and have some fun.
Because like Simon Pegg was a side character with a mask on in one of the movies. Like you couldn't even tell he was there. And I know that Daniel Craig was the stormtrooper that was
in episode 7, yeah.
And with Rey, like, and Let Her Go, and like they do that sort of stuff all the time.
Yeah.
But they never are like, here's a big star on screen. So it's a weird thing for them to put it in theaters unless, of course, it's a big plot point that they don't want anybody to miss, and they want that extra level of hype on socials or whatever else.
Maybe
if you see a big reveal in theater, you're going to talk about it. You're going to be like, holy shit, I got to go see that thing on big screen in the limited release. That's going to get some good headlines.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Disney's been fairly happy with Ahsoka's streaming numbers, right? And they started talking about it. They're equal to what Andor was. They're doing okay. I think that the first 3 episodes will really build up to this 4th episode, which is really where stuff happened.
Okay.
Right? Like the 4th episode is really where the plot kind of goes. And the plot thing, like we are now in the meat of what's happening. Everything up to this point has kind of been set up. Somebody in the chat saying they're disappointed in Sabine. She couldn't destroy the map, but I hated seeing her hand it over. I mean, I wouldn't even put that as a disappointed moment. Again, I think that there's definitely been some writing issues with the first 3 episodes of Ahsoka, and I think that they're kind of hitting their stride in this 4th episode. I totally understood why she was like, I can't destroy the map. Ezra's the only person she's got left, right? And she just watched Ahsoka get, booted off the side of a cliff, right? And so Sabine has no reference to think that Ahsoka's still alive, right? So, no, I can totally get that. I really like Ray Stevenson as this Dark Jedi dude. Balin, I think is his name. He's putting in a killer performance. His apprentice is putting in a killer performance. David Tennant as Hu Yang is crushing it, right? The casting on this show is phenomenal. I really can't say anything like super negative. You know what I mean? Like,
That's good.
This episode ending on the cliffhanger of Ahsoka ending up in the world between worlds and looking at Anakin. Now, I told John this before the thing, so obviously Star Wars, my original fandom. But what's interesting is I watch everything with the closed captions on, right? And so sometimes I'll pick you. The captions will have details in them that if you're not watching it, you won't notice. So there's two things to note about when she sees Anakin at the end of episode 4. Number one, if you're watching closed captions and if you're listening closely, you will note that it is the Vader theme that plays, not the Anakin theme. Right? So, there you go. So first off, it's a Vader theme. Second off, look closely at the lightsaber he's got on his hip. It is not Anakin's saber. Right? It is Vader's. Right? Yes, we could fight to the death about them killing the EU. They had to do it. I will defend that, and I appreciate it. F you, Alex Bitts. Thank you very much. Nagaratier, I appreciate this. You've had this fight with me in person before. I will happily have this fight with anybody. When Disney purchased Lucasfilm, they had to get rid of the old EU. Right?
Yeah.
They had to.
I mean, like, I will...
It was far too convoluted for them to continue with.
It is frustrating as a fan, but also understandable that if they want to develop more, if they wanted to develop more content and be able to do it themselves and, you know, have creative liberties with it where, you know, maybe the story's already told in a book or the story's already told in a thing, I think that it does make sense for them to have to do this from a business perspective. Absolutely. Yeah. From a fan perspective, it sucks. And, you know, the extended universe, the beautiful thing about an extended universe is, like, it's never dead for the fan, right? Like, as a fan, you can go and continue to enjoy those things in the context of what they are, absolutely. And, you know, from a business perspective, let them do what they're doing with the film, shows, and everything else around it, and hope that we get something close to or akin to some of your favorite stories.
And they've slowly been recanonizing things like Thrawn, right? And they've been saying, okay, these elements from the EU we're going to pull forward. Thrawn, the Nograi, other stuff.
I mean, once we start getting into those, like, living coral ships and Jaina and Jaqen and, like, the moon crushing a particular
Chewie,
person,
yeah,
and, like then we're like ripping off books at that point.
Yeah, I mean, again, it to me from a business perspective, from a writing perspective, it made sense to me as to why they did that. Now, if George had, the thing that everybody has to remember is between 83, from 1983 when Return of the Jedi was released, all we had was the novels for 16 years. And somebody earlier mentioned, you know, they haven't released a movie in a long time, and John and I were talking about this in the pre-show too. They've announced and canceled so many films at this point for Star Wars that it's beginning to get frustrating. And by that I mean is frustrating. But it's not really any different than George, right? He had them. He waited, 15 years after Return of the Jedi to even develop Episode 1, right? Like, he waited a long time. There was no Star Wars content besides the EU. And then when he came in, George famously hated the EU. Couldn't stand it. He really, really disliked the books, right? Which is also one of the funny things when I get into these arguments with people, there are typically a lot of people who are like, but George's vision for Star Wars and do-do-do-do-do. And I'm like, and they also simultaneously defend the EU. I'm like, you know that George hated the EU, right? Right? The reason Anakin Solo died in the Yuuzhan Vong books was because George said, F you, you can't have an Anakin character because I'm making the prequels. Kill him. Right? The writers and the story group at the time didn't want to kill Anakin Solo. But George said, yeah, you got to kill him now. Right? Because he didn't want there to be two Anakins out there. I'm
just curious if we're ever going to get an Exar Kun to show up anywhere.
So George approved the creation of this. This is a common misconception. George approved the creation of the EU, right? Of the old EU. But he very rarely stuck his fingers into what was actually happening, right? And it was only in rare occasions where when he started going back to work on the prequels, right, that he said, you're going to do this. George did not read every EU novel, comic book, RPG supplement, everything else, because he didn't care, right? Like, he just didn't. Timothy Zahn's talked about a lot when he went to go write Heir to the Empire in the old EU, and he asked for the lore book. Basically, he wanted the Bible, right? And any series like this, whether it's Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever, they've got what they call the Bible, and it's basically here are the rules of the universe, here are the guardrails, right? Here's what's canon, what's not. What they sent Timothy Zahn was the West End Games Star Wars role-playing game.
So they didn't send him like a Silmarillion, they just sent him a game somebody made.
They sent him the West End Games Star Wars.
Wow,
And
okay.
said, here you go, this is what we got. Because they didn't have anything, because George never created it. It was all sitting in George's head.
Ooh, that's okay. Yeah, that's rough.
Okay. Actually, he's been talking with Filoni. Yes, so the new Disney Plus shows are probably closer to George's original vision, although his original vision for the sequel films, and this has come out, they were going to go into the miniature universe. That was George's concept for 7, 8, and 9. Is he was going to shrink, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids style, the characters, Luke, Han, and Leia, and send them into the microverse.
That sounds terrible.
Uh-huh.
I'm just going to say it out. I'm going to be the first one to say it. That sounds terrible.
It was a bad idea. Right?
The movies that we got, even though they weren't amazingly fantastic, especially the last one, but like, man, I would take that over Honey, I Shrunk the Kids Star Wars.
Yeah.
Every day of the week.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That was the concept. They were going to go meet the Metachlorians. Please, everybody.
Meet the Metachlorians. No, they shouldn't even exist.
This is the thing. Again, I get a lot of people.
That old man needs to go retire.
Star Wars is my first fandom. It is my favorite fandom. I absolutely adore Star Wars. I read the entire old EU, right? Of anybody. Like, I was heavily invested in the old EU. I played Star Wars role-playing games from West End Games through when Wizards of the Coast had it, right? Because lest we not forget, Star Wars version 3 or version 2 was freaking Wizards, right? And it was built on the same platform as D&D 3.0, right? Hot take. It wasn't George. It wasn't the reason. And I'm going to come back to that in a second, Tamadachi. George is a phenomenal innovator. And if you want to talk about a guy who knows how to innovate filmmaking, the stuff that he did from a technical standpoint on Episode 4, Star Wars A New Hope, in 1976, 1975, when he actually made it, was revolutionary. Mm-hmm. Right? Those special effects still hold up.
That's true.
In 2023. And he did that with old battleship like model kits and fancy stuff. The guy basically...
And we're not talking about the remasters. We're literally talking about...
the originals.
The originals. Yeah, absolutely.
He basically invented blue screen technology. He basically invented THX sound. Right? Remember, all these companies, Industrial Light and Magic, the company that we all love for their special effects, the guys that did Jurassic Park and everything else, that was his company. Right? George is a phenomenal innovator. He's a great filmmaker and a shrewd business guy. He's a bad writer.
That's fair. Yeah,
okay?
I can agree with that.
And people who are like, he's not, I'm like, what is your favorite what is the best written Star Wars movie in your opinion, John?
I don't know.
Most people will say Empire. Right? Empire Strikes Back.
I mean, yeah.
Right? He didn't write it.
I guess, weirdly enough, I never really thought about that.
George didn't write Empire, nor did he write Return of the Jedi. He did write all of the prequels, and for that we got the love story between Anakin and Padme in Episode 2 that everybody lambasted the crap out of it.
And Metachlorians.
And we got Metachlorians, right? He's a great director. Visually, the prequels are stunning. Right?
Yeah, I'll
the
give him
shot
that,
compositions, sure. All that stuff, they are really well done. He's a bad writer. Right? He doesn't know how to write dialogue. The closest he got to it And if you haven't seen it, I recommend it as a film. Again, another movie that I think holds up really, really well is American Graffiti, right? And it takes place in the 50s. It's something he made before he made Star Wars. It's got Harrison Ford and Ron Howard and some great names in it, and it's a phenomenal film. Everything else he's ever written has been kind of mediocre. And again, I love George. I love Star Wars. The dialogue in episodes 1, 2, and 3 is terrible. And again, everybody who gripes about midichlorians, he wrote it. Okay? He wrote it. Right? So, he can't get the performance to come out of the actors. I would disagree. I think episode 1 was fine, honestly. I think episode 1, and there's a lot of people now who go back and watch episode 1 and go, it really isn't as bad as people made it out to be. Right? Liam Neeson did fine. Ewan McGregor was a revelation as Obi-Wan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? We know some mild racism in there. He brought back, Palpatine was great, right? Mm-hmm. The kid playing Anakin was a kid, right? Natalie Portman was fine, right? She wasn't terrible. She wasn't great. She was what she was supposed to be. Episode 2, I don't think Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman had that much chemistry.
Yeah.
I think that was the big issue, was that those two didn't have any chemistry. I think Hayden's fine. And obviously they're bringing it back for
I enjoyed
Ahsoka.
episode 3, personally. Out of the 3 of them, I think episode 3 was the one that moved the plot along the most for me.
It was good.
Like, things happened. I also liked them touching upon, like, the transformation of what's happening there and, like, how the relationship kind of fractures between him and Obi-Wan. And, like, honestly, I would have loved that fight scene over the lava to be more like it was in the book. But I don't think they were going to go that crazy, because they were basically, like, fighting on instinct until they, like, cut each other's robes off, and they were doing a little ballet on that one piece of metal that's floating along. And, like, I don't think they would have got that crazy with it, but that's how in sync that fight was supposed to be.
Yeah. Absolutely. And watching, like you said, watching that disintegration of their relationship. Mm-hmm. Even from the beginning of that film.
Yeah.
Right?
Slowly but surely.
As that kind of goes on, how arrogant and stupid the Jedi were. Like, that film does a really good job showing how dumb the Jedi were.
At that very moment, yes.
Right? And that was why they failed. That was why the Republic fell. On the upside, we got a lot of memes from them, so worth it, probably.
You know what? Yes. For this generation, absolutely.
And I'm sorry, the Darth Maul fight in episode 1 is amazing.
It is. It's great. When we talk about shows, I was so, spoilers again for anybody that hasn't seen it. If you haven't seen it at this point, it's been a while. But when they brought Maul back in Clone Wars, I was so hyped. The brother sequence and blah 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 and all the other stuff. That's cool. But when Maul came back, I was like, here's a real chance for them to do something with the character that they could have done so much with in the films. But they kill him off. They killed him off way too quick.
Mm-hmm. The Jedi were dumb. Yes, the Jedi were absolutely stupid. Right? 100% they were dumb. And this is, somebody brought up earlier in the chat, and I'm probably going to have to cut this around when I do YouTube. Somebody brought up in the chat that the Filoni stuff is much closer. Yes, because Filoni is George's, for lack of a better term, Filoni is George's apprentice. Right? And one of the things that happened with Clone Wars, in my opinion, what I think happened was, as Filoni was working with George on Clone Wars, right, the cartoon, because George was heavily involved in Clone Wars, right, was that Filoni had the privilege of being able to, without making George mad, ask him questions. Hey, George, how the heck does Yoda get from, at the end of episode 2 to by the end of episode 3, when he says goodbye to Obi-Wan, he's like, someone to commune with you have, right? And he's talking about Qui-Gon, right? He's sending Obi-Wan to Tatooine to watch over Luke and commune with Qui-Gon. How did that happen? Because we don't see Force ghosts anywhere else in episodes 1, 2, or 3, right? And so how does that happen? And so in Clone Wars, they explain how that happens, right? In Clone Wars, he goes, hey, how does Anakin go from being Padawan Anakin at the end of episode 2 to you know, and what's the time gap here? And most people don't realize one of the things that wasn't clear between episodes 2 and 3 before Clone Wars came along was how big is the time gap, right? How long did the Clone Wars actually last? Was it a month? Was it 6 months? Was it 12? What was it, right? Because at the beginning of episode 3, it is not clear how long the Clone Wars have been happening. Right?
That's true, yeah.
We just go, oh, look, Anakin has long hair now and no Padawan braid. Cool, so he's a Jedi Knight.
Yeah, it could have been 10 years for all we know. Like,
right. We have no indication whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right? Which has always been kind of a problem with Star Wars, is that time is kind of a relative issue. Hence how, Anakin falls in the lava, and somehow Palpatine's able to make it from the Galactic Core at Coruscant to Mustafar in time to pick Anakin up out of the lava and put him on the thingy. Like, isn't that kind of a distance from Coruscant to Mustafar? Like,
So we do have a lot of movies on our docket over here, as far as like other things we need to cover. Is there any other one you want to move to?
Yeah, let's do that, because we only have about 15 minutes left. If you have any questions for the chat, right? It's a fast travel system, probably. Fast travel. Episode 2 was the beginning of Anakin's fall. He murders an entire tribe of sand people.
Yep.
Like, straight up murks them. Right? Like, everybody forgets, like, and then he does that really bad scene where he's like, I killed them all, the women and the children too. Like, we start to see the beginning of his fall in episode 2. It happens. Look, meme of sand people aren't people. Oh, no. Too far. All right. Let's see. What else did we cover? Real quick one. Again, if you have any topics you want us to talk about in chat, go ahead and let us know. You can drop those in right now in either YouTube or Twitch chat. Stray. So you guys know, like last year when we were streaming on this channel, we streamed a few times the game Stray with the cool cat in the cyberpunk universe. It's going to be a movie. What is your thoughts? Did you play Stray at all, John?
So I haven't played Stray yet. It's on my list. I'm actually gonna look up something. Nimona, yeah. So my thought is I'm not like particularly surprised here that we're seeing more films come out of Annapurna.
Yeah.
From what I remember, and let me look this up because I want to make sure I got the right information here. Nimona was something that was done by Annapurna, and then it saw so much success that they are venturing into more film. I want to make sure I've got that correct. But yeah, so I'm not surprised. They have, Annapurna Animation is something, so that is Annapurna. It's Annapurna Animation. Annapurna, has made a ton of good games that could be adapted very well into stories. Stray is one of those things that like there is more that you could expand on in that universe because you are just a cat. You could show so many different things. I mean, you could still just do a cat, but there's so much of that world that you could build on and actually do stuff with. So I'm not surprised that we would see something. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more Annapurna movies announced soon. Stray being just kind of like the tip of the iceberg.
There's so much you can do with this film. Most people don't realize that Stray's got like a really deep storyline to it. Mm-hmm. Even though you're just like a cat wandering a city with no humans left. There's so much there. The thing I saw, they could do so much with this. I'm excited for Stray.
Yep. Lots of potential.
Lots of potential for that. So another quick hit. We got a new Ghibli film trailer.
Yeah.
I'm excited. So this is probably going to be Miyazaki's final film.
And this is to be clear, this is a Miyazaki film. And I think that's one of the big things about this is that there have been a few Studio Ghibli things, or however you say it out there, that he was not actually on. This he is on. And this he is, do we know, I'm assuming he is director on this one.
I believe so, yeah.
And we're going to actually have a trailer for y'all here in just a second. We're all going to watch it together. We're going to live react to this because like we haven't seen this yet either.
Yep.
But yeah, this is a brand new thing, just dropped like a day or two ago. This could be pretty exciting for a lot of people.
Make sure I mute some other stuff here. Okay, let's try this. So,
so the very classic
Ghibli
style, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is nice to see, especially after the 3D film that they made.
So yeah, this is Miyazaki. He's directing.
It's definitely got the vibe. You know, just like already has that vibe.
I keep in mind, this is the first trailer, so I'm sure we'll get more as it gets closer. Oh, that's a little creepy. Okay.
This is got classic Miyazaki vibes.
お待ちしておりましたぞ。
December 8th. Wow. Okay.
That's
That is
soon.
awesome.
Super soon.
So I got to see When the Wind Rises in theaters. So I am going to have to make a point to see this in theaters as well. That looks really good. Landscapes look really good. You know, everything in the animation was top notch, as we come to expect from a Ghibli film.
Yep.
The characters felt like when you look at that, it invokes a lot of the traditional, you know, animation emotions that I get from like watching a Princess Mononoke or something. Like the main character looks shockingly like the main character from Mononoke, but it looks like it's going to have a lot of whimsy and a lot of thought-provoking moments already just from the trailer. And you know what? For me, that's what makes up a lot of a Ghibli film. Whether it be Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, whether it be, you know, My Neighbor Totoro, some of the older stuff that they did, like, I can't remember the one with the raccoons, but, like, there are just so many of them that they invoke this feeling in the animation alone, and I cannot wait to be able to just, like, watch the trailer again and just, like, kind of break it down, but that looks fantastic.
It looks really, really good. Chat topics. Any movement on the strike? Any movement on the strike? Yeah, in the wrong direction. And in fact, SAG-AFTRA, that the sections that cover now video game voiceovers, right, which is really going to affect the video game industry and a lot of the other technical side of it, they've now voted to strike as well.
Yeah, so that was something that
was last week?
Yeah, and the decision was yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yeah. That they are now getting into the strike as well. They were basically, I don't remember how this works exactly off the top of my head, but they were consulting with somebody to see if they could strike and move into the strike, and then they finally have done it. So they are also striking.
There you go. No, it's actually going the opposite direction. There has been a lot of discussions about what's happening with the AMPTP. I saw some great commentary yesterday, and again, I think John and we talked about this a few weeks ago. The issue is you've got tech companies in the same room with film companies that are very different. They have very different cultural and business DNA, right? Apple and Netflix have a very different DNA than a Warner Brothers or a Disney. You also have companies that are typically competitors, like Disney, Warner Brothers, etc., having to all go, okay, we need to work together temporarily to make sure that we can end this strike with both the WGA and SAG.
So yeah, the SAG-AFTRA has been on strike against the film and scripted TV production since July 14th, and voting to authorize a strike against 10 major video game companies signed to the Guild's interactive media agreement began on Tuesday.
There you go. The AMPTP is also, the AMPTP is just, they can't get out of their own way. Chat saying I saw an article saying that CEOs are surprised that no one likes them and isn't on their side on the strike. They hired a new PR firm, the MPTP did recently. Yes, because they're fighting this in the court of public opinion right now.
And they are losing.
And they are losing.
They are just losing.
Yeah. Especially with all of the other labor action that's happened across the country this summer.
Well, and people, and like, just, I want to put a cap on this thing. So the Guild's first and only strike against the gaming companies was in 2016 and 17. It lasted 183 days. So
6 months.
They took it. They took it far. And like, so we are seeing, so like public opinion is really bad for them right now because we are able to watch them do things in real time on social media that I don't think that they would want anybody to know about. One of my favorite things that I'm seeing during this SAG-AFTRA strike is the arbor laws that are coming into effect, where people are actually going after them for cutting the trees that are around the picket lines because they don't technically own them.
No,
like all of this other stuff where it's just like, now they're getting lawyers involved, now they're getting them sued, now they're like, it's little stuff like that that we can see full force that normally we wouldn't be privy to. And now everybody knows that, like, yes, you can hire the best PR team in the world, but if you're going to do that shit, social media is so powerful that your PR team is going to get buried underneath the wave of all the other press because everybody's got a phone, everybody's got a camera, and most of these people are connected.
Again, you have to, and I'm not defending the CEOs, I am not defending the corporations. The issue is a matter of incentives, right? And it's not just CEOs. CEOs, ultimately, Bob Iger and David Zaslav are not sitting in the room with the negotiators. They have a team, right? And again, it's not just WB. It's Apple. So it's Tim Cook. It's the heads of Netflix. It's everybody. All these guys have to get into the thing to do the work, right? And it's not the CEOs who are doing the negotiating. They provide guidelines and guardrails to the negotiating committee, right? But it's a negotiating committee that works for the MPTP that does the actual physical negotiating. And you have to understand it's a matter of incentive. And we've talked about this on the show before. Wall Street has trained these entertainment companies to act like tech companies, right? They've said, it's not just growth. It's not just stable profits. It's exponential growth, right? Yeah. It's exponential profits. We want Disney to be Apple, right? We want these guys to do this stuff. And the thing is, the entertainment industry doesn't work that way. And part of it is how they've structured this is about incentives. And as somebody who used to work for a soul-sucking giant mega corporation, I will tell you this. When you are in a position where you are called P&L responsible, right? Your sole motivation, your sole job, because it's how you are evaluated and it's whether you get to keep your job, is did I make more money than last year, right?
Yep.
The last job I had before I came here, right? That was my job. Like, my job title was weird, but at the end of the day, right, there was a variety of metrics that the corporation uses to determine whether they're doing their job. Yeah, technically. But do you know what the only one they really cared about was? Did I make them more money than last year?
Money.
That's it. That's the end of the game. And that's what the shareholders care about, right? These are all publicly traded companies who have a fiduciary responsibility, a legal fiduciary responsibility, right, to make money for the shareholders. That's it. That's the end of the game. The problem they've got is that they've got to get out of this zero-sum game mentality, right, where if I win, you have to lose.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what will end the strike, is when they realize that the juice is no longer worth the squeeze. The fact that AMC, and not the theaters, but AMC, the network, has now broken from the AMCTP's position and has said, SAG, we'll give you whatever you want. Get back to work, right? Because they want to do the next Walking Dead. They want to do the next interview.
Because, like, wasn't one of the first groups to give them what they want? It was like A24 or something like that. They were like the first people at the table. They were like, sure, yeah, we'll do it all.
And basically the way those agreements work, and I was looking into this yesterday when AMC broke theirs, is AMC and A24 have said, we will give you whatever, when the strike ends, we will agree to that term, right? Up to and including everything you've asked for on your side of the term sheet.
And it's wild to me because like you've got to imagine from a cost perspective, it is cost more for them to try to keep a lid on this and get everybody back to work in their corporate way versus what they could spend to do these concessions and just get these people back to work with what they want. Like it's wild to me, like how much money they've had to spend to do this when they could just pay them. Just
the
fucking pay
last
them.
investor call for Warner Brothers Discovery, they think they're going to end up losing $300 to $500 million due to the strikes. That's their write down.
That's wild though. Like you're okay. People are not gonna be happy about you just eating that, right? And these strikes are not gonna end at any time soon until you come to the table and give them what they want.
Yeah. I don't know if it's they have too much. They have a lot in the bank right now. I think that they believe that they can outsit them, and that's the big question, right? And this is also why it's not about how they survived during COVID or how much they have in the bank. That's why they're fighting this in the court of public opinion right now, right? So to correct somebody in the chat, they could try. They could try to hire somebody from outside the guild. The problem is this: if you cross the line and you're an actor or a writer, when the strike ends, you will never work again.
Yeah, if you scab, you'll never work again. And in most cases,
they got a list.
If you're scabbing, as a matter of fact, I can tell you right now for sure, we actually at SOBA have told people to be very cautious about taking on work in this current state, especially if you're a content creator, because if you do this and you become a scab, as soon as this is over, you are done in the industry. Your career is done.
It's over. You're done.
And you don't want to put yourself in that position.
Yep. Because both guilds have bylaws saying that if you cross during the point of a strike, you can never join the guild.
Yep.
It's an immediate disqualification from joining the guild. As to whether there's enough talent outside the guild, it's a very good question. Again, this is the bet that the studios are making, right? We're not deep enough, honestly, into this strike to know. Fall TV's now delayed. It's toast. A lot of movies are getting pushed back. The other thing that's actually affecting this right now, and it's on our typical topical list, right? So somebody recently broke AMC Theaters' single-day ticket sales, right? And they were already helping. The theaters were already upset with the AMPTP, right? Because the studios had screwed over the movie theaters. So now single-day ticket sales got broken by Taylor Swift. She's putting her Eras Tour in theaters. 4 major film releases have moved off her initial date. Screw you. And she went around the studios and negotiated the distribution deal herself.
Yeah, what a thing.
So, this is not, that right there is going to keep the theaters running and humming and in business and happy. And so now there's not going to be pressure from the theaters, right, to the Actors Guild and everybody else to get this back on strike. They don't care, right? Hey, Beyonce, you want to do a theater release?
Yeah.
Ed Sheeran, you want to do a theater release? They will fill in content.
Yep.
Right?
Well, 'cause that's what they have to do. I mean, those big ass spaces aren't going to stay empty for long.
Nope. They will fill in content. They will start doing other stuff. They don't care, right? And what they've proven is that this is a profitable venture for them, right? So, do I think that this is going to break the strike? No, not in the least bit. The other update on this is the 2 other major headlines here is this. They'd gone back to talks with the WGA. So the AMPTP has started sitting down with the WGA on a limited basis thus far. They also released the AMPTP released a term sheet that they had sent over to the writers that the writers initially rejected. But they're at least talking. SAG-AFTRA put out a statement saying that they had approached the AMPTP and said, hey, do you want to come back and actually negotiate? Because the thing you got to remember is they weren't for a long time even talking, right? Everybody was sitting in their corners and nobody was saying anything.
Yep.
When SAG approached the AMPTP and said, we'd like to come back to the negotiating table, The AMPTP said no. Which I don't think was a smart move on the part of the AMPTP.
Yep.
How long do you see this going?
I mean, because of the fact that games are just now getting involved, I don't think we see it end to this before the end of the year.
Both strikes?
I really don't. Yeah. The way that they're going, the way that they're basically saying we're gonna sit on our fat banks of money until they run out. Those banks of cash are pretty fat. Let them run out, but we're probably not going to see this end for a while. I would love to see it end before then, but personally, the way that it seems like the corporations are wanting to just drag this out, I really don't see it ending before the end of the year. I really don't. Unless some crazy concessions happen, because we are starting to see that. So like, maybe, but the majority, I just don't, you know.
Thank you for the business run. The one that made me go, huh, right, was when they moved Dune.
Yeah.
Moving
right?
Dune 2 to next year because they can't promote it properly. Because the movie's in the can. It's done.
Mm-hmm.
It's done. Right? They pushed Dune 2 into 2024 because guess what? Stars can't come out to promote.
Yeah.
And nobody cares about watching Denis Villeneuve at a press junket for 6 weeks because he's the only one that can talk about this movie. Right? Like, I think as they keep having to move these dates back on these major releases because they can't promote them, you know.
So they're going to break eventually. And the reason that I say because of the end of the year is because like we need to see more stuff move. And we just saw another very large group as we talk about the games industry. How big is it? We talk about this all the time. Bigger than most of these things combined. Yep. So when you get that side of it involved and investors start seeing, oh, we're not doing anything anymore, no entertainment is coming out, no, this has to stop and you have to make some concessions, that's when it'll happen.
I said, I think the writers one's probably going to break before the actors do. If I was going to guess which strike was going to push forward.
I could see them getting their deal sooner. Because they need to write this stuff before they have actors come in and act this stuff. So they need the writers back as soon as possible.
Yep.
Absolutely. The actors they can take some time with because they know you don't need the actor till the script is done or mostly done anyways, so what's the fucking matter? But the writers are kneecapping literally everything that's happening for good reason as we speak. So like that's I fully agree with you there. That's the one that I would see come back first. I would expect to come back first. Unless there are a lot of scripts on the table that are not being acted right now.
I mean, so the issue is this. Every studio maintains like a freaking vault of scripts that they've just bought. Right? Like stuff that they just have sitting in rooms. And in fact, it was one of the articles that AMPTP leaked to the Hollywood Reporter is that one of the studios has said, well, we've got 2,000 scripts we've been sitting on for years. We're just going to go back to the well. Problem is most of those scripts need rewriting, and nobody can rewrite them.
Right.
That's why they weren't produced so far. They're not done yet. Right? Like, they're done, but they need some work.
Well, guess what? You ain't got nobody to edit that or work on it.
Yeah. It also doesn't help that they did have another appeals court judge come out and say that AI anything cannot be copyrighted.
Yeah, we did get that little bit. So that is good.
I think that's going to push toward the WGA strike being done. Yeah. Because it's going to take it off the table. Because the WGA is going to come in and go, you don't want AI on this. You do not want AI writing these scripts because you can't copyright it.
Yep, 100%. And like hell, they're going to put out free shows.
No, they're not going to release scripts that somebody else could grab the same script and just go make it again.
Right, yep.
You know, so we will see. We'll see what happens.
So it looks like we've hit most of the chat questions for the day.
Balanced data slate. I have not had a chance to deep dive the balanced data slate for 40K yet. I was glancing at it here during the stream. There's a new MetaWatch article up on the GW community site.
I can only talk to you about 40K and Warhammer video games. I can do that for sure. I don't know much about the tabletop, but I'll tell you what, Darktide's getting a full overhaul on October 8th. They're adding skill trees to all the character classes. Darktide is going to be fantastic. Vermintide is actually adding a new character for free as DLC.
They're also coming out with another one?
Vermintide is still going.
Warhammer 40K Rogue Traders coming. They had a big booth at PAX.
Yeah, so like there is a lot of like, somebody in the comments earlier was saying like the 40K universe is really hard to follow because it's spread all over. Like as far as like lore goes, it's just kind of spread so thin like the extended universe. But I think that what we're starting to see is we're starting to see some really refined, polished gems start to shine through, and those developers getting to continue their license or work on other things. Like they, Games Workshop is really interesting because they license portions of like literally portions of things. That's why Vermintide, it was specifically the Vermintide, happening. Darktide, specifically this one area thing happening in 40K. It's not like they don't get access to the whole universe. They get access to moments in time, essentially, or things that are happening or things they can build out. And being able to see developers take that and build more and more and more upon them and then get access to doing more, I think we're going to start to see those diamonds really refined and really solidify what is the core of the universe like some people are looking for.
Also,
Darktide is lame? Oh man, we got to play Darktide together. I'll change your mind, don't worry.
Hey guys, we're gonna get our Henry Cavill Warhammer show. Okay, so eventually we'll have the definitive canon Warhammer 40K experience when Henry Cavill finishes his show for Amazon.
I'll take that.
Yep.
Necron, at some point we got to discuss why you think Darktide is lame. I'd love to hear it. It is one of those things where it is a lot of differing opinions on that, but one of these days I would love to talk about that.
I'm gonna have to come in here and dig on the point values and the stuff. There's a lot. I'll be honest, just my first glance, I'm surprised the balanced data slate is not more. There's not much they've changed.
We won't get a Half-Life 3. Valve can't count to 3. We already know this.
Yeah. Just forget it. It makes me sad every day. Okay. All right, folks. That's going to be our show for today. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't forget, we've got lots of fun things happening at the store all the time. Go check the calendar at gamers7pnw.com. And come in and see us.
Come ask me how I got this sweet ass Vampire the Masquerade pin. If anybody noticed, it's a good story.
Yeah, I'm gonna hear the story right after. So come in and see us tomorrow night's Commander Night. We will be back with the show on Tuesday because today is Thursday, so it is our last show of the week. But again, if you missed any of this stuff or you want to go back and review the stuff where we've talked about SAG strikes and all this stuff. Go to youtube.com/gamers7pnw. Also, share us everywhere you can. Like, throw us up on Facebook and Twitter and all those places.
Yeah.
It actually really helps us to get shared out by not us. So, we appreciate all of you, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Tired of investing so much into your YouTube channel only to see your hard work go unnoticed? Yeah,